Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching India Tonight with me, Sumita Karir, and our top story this hour. Well, India and the United States are engaged in discussions to resolve tariff-related issues, with both the nations working towards framework for a bilateral trade agreement, and that's the word coming in from the Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson, Mr. Randir Ajay Sahai. He said that during a press briefing today. He said, and I quote, "I'd like to emphasize that both India and the United States are in discussions about this matter. Both governments are taking steps to discuss the framework for a bilateral trade agreement." He was signaling a possible breakthrough in the ongoing negotiations. Now, India's foreign ministry has also expressed optimism. It's noted that the two sides would, quote-unquote, hopefully reach an understanding on the tariff matter. These talks are seen as a step forward in strengthening economic ties between the two countries. And to discuss the possible outcomes of these negotiations between India and the United States and what to make of Donald Trump's latest comments on tariff with respect to India, I'm now joined by Ajay Sahai, the DG and CEO of the Federation of Indian Export Organizations. Thank you very much, Mr. Sahai, for joining us here on ET Now. First things first, Donald Trump once again raising the tariff bogey with respect to India. So when he issues another veiled threat to impose reciprocal tariffs on April the 2nd, how serious is he, given that there's been a lot of back and forth with other countries as well? And how do you think India-US approach is going to be different on tariffs from what has happened and transpired with US-Canada or US-Mexico?
In fact, you must be remembering that when our Prime Minister met Mr. Trump, we both agreed that we will be working toward Mission 500. That means taking the bilateral trade from the current level of $200 billion to $500 billion by 2030, and also work on the bilateral trade agreements. So in that background, when we have decided that we'll concluding a BTA by fall of 2025, I think this seems to be a negotiating posture to extract as much as possible before the actual negotiation starts. Because you cannot change the goalpost once a decision has been taken at the highest level. So to me, it's a negotiating posture, and I'm pretty sure the negotiator on the both sides are working very actively. The Commerce Minister has gone on record to say that the government is working overtime on the BTA. And I'm pretty sure that though the threat of 2nd of April is there, but looking into the way in which India has actively engaged with the US, which none of the other country has so far done, we will be getting a deferment on the reciprocal tariff. And I'm pretty sure by the fall of 2025, we will have a BTA in place, which is providing tariff concession on the item of India's export interest. And so will be US seeking an item of their own export interest.
But, sir, do you expect the approach that India has taken with respect to working on that bilateral trade deal? Essentially, India is stating that we're working towards a mutually beneficial bilateral trade deal. Do you think that will assure that retaliatory tariffs will be kept at bay for the time being, at least?
In fact, you must have seen that wherever the retaliatory tariffs were put into place, next day the retaliatory tariffs were deferred also. So this is not something which is new. And the fact of the matter is that we are already constructively engaged with the US. We are working in that direction. US team is expected to be in India in April to take it forward. So I'm pretty sure that these dates should be deferred, maybe deferment maybe for a month or 2 months just to keep the pressure. But we will be successfully concluding the BTA to take care of our export interest.
Right, and that's a very valid point, Mr. Sahai, that you've made, and I'll get back to that in just a bit. But Trump's main concern has been around reducing trade surplus. So, what possible mechanisms could be arrived at to take care of his concerns, and what concessions could India give?
In fact, a lot of defense imports which are happening, they are not part of the trade deficit which is being reflected by the US. And I'm pretty sure that the government of India is also keen to look into what other products can be imported from the US. We have now opportunity of importing petrochemicals from the US also. Shell gas is one thing which we can import from the US. A lot of defense equipments are being imported. We have aviation sector growing. So we can import those aircraft also from the US. And I'm pretty sure that in times to come, we will see that happening. Though, of course, trade deficit has increased, but for a country of the size of US economy, $45 billion should not be of a concern, but India has managed with a trade deficit of close to $100 billion with China.
Absolutely. Mr. Sahai, now, having said that, how would it, the said bilateral trade agreement assuage concerns of the United States and protect Indian interests? I mean, and I want to understand from you, can it be reached before April the 2nd? You've said that, it's going to take some time. So what interim measures are both the sides going to take so that the relationship remains on a solid footing and tariffs do not really come in the way of the bilateral relationship that India and the United States have?
I think before 2nd of April, we will definitely moving forward in that direction. That should be quite sufficient for the US interest also. It may not be possible to struck a deal by 2nd of April. We are running short of time. But the very fact that we are moving towards the goal to finalize them by the fall of 2025 should definitely assure US that we are looking into not only our own interest, but of the US interest also. And like any free trade agreement, it will be give and take. We will definitely having our own wish list. US will come with their own wish list, and probably the two sides will negotiate what best can be offered by each other.
Right. So, Mr. Sahai, what will happen in the interim?
So in the interim,
What are the possible outcomes that you see?
I personally feel that the 2nd April deadline will be deferred, and we will continue to work closely with that. He may be thinking that some more announcement may come because we have already given concession to the US on the Harley Davidson motorcycle. We have already provided some concession on the bourbon whiskey also. Some other concession may flow. I'm not sure what is the view of the government on that. But to me, it seems to be just something to extract from India. Because once the two leadership has already committed for the BTA and give a terminal date of fall of 2025, we should not threaten with a new deadline of 2nd of April for imposing the reciprocal tariff.
Okay, so there's nothing to worry about. But let me ask you from an investor point of view, should investors, and let me just rephrase this question and ask it in another way, should investors be dreading April the 2nd? Sir, I ask this question because, the market has seen really a volatile past few weeks. This week, of course, it has recovered a bit. But should investors be dreading that date?
The point is that definitely it's an era of uncertainty. And in an era of uncertainty, we have seen that investors are concerned. Probably that kind of situation may continue, but if the reciprocal tariff is deferred on India, that will be a positive sign. Investor will have confidence that India is working with the US, and to that extent, probably they will be satisfied also. So in the given situation, when the uncertainty is there, I can appreciate the feelings and the sentiments of the investor also. But I'm pretty sure once the 2nd of April deadline is deferred and India actively engaged with the US to take the BTA forward and conclude it by September, we will see all those investors making a beeline for investment in India. We are the fastest growing economy. We are now having the very large middle class, and a lot of countries are looking for investment opportunity, including the US.
Right, so that's a vote of confidence being expressed by you in India as an investment destination by FIIs. But sir, there is one view that both sides could essentially be looking at sidestepping WTO's principle of non-discriminatory tariffs while negotiating lower tariffs on goods in their proposed bilateral trade agreement. So what's the likelihood of that? Because they will be, like I said, sidestepping one of key WTO rules on MFN.
No, point is that once you are carving out a bilateral trade agreement, you are within your rights. FTAs are part of the WTO permissible regime only. So I think once we work out on the BTA, probably we may be notifying the WTO that's part of a free trade agreement only. And that is well within the discipline that the WTO has said. WTO talks about the MFN with only those countries with whom you are not having a preferential or free trading arrangement. Once you have the preferential or free trading arrangement, you are within the right to give concession on a reciprocal basis.
Right, but sir, according to WTO rules, MFN status actually requires that, all the other countries that are part of, that MFN status should be treated equally. So can India make those concessions, or the United States make those concessions for India and not for the rest of the countries?
Free trade agreement or regional trading arrangement are an exception to an MFN principle. Once we worked on a free trade arrangement with the US, we will be our right to extend a separate tariff to the US as compared to the other countries. If we are not working on a free trade or preferential trade agreement with the US, you are right that probably we cannot make an exception to the US. It's a violation of the MFN principle. But once we are working on a free trade agreement and we are informing the WTO of that, we are within our right to provide some lower tariff to US as compared to our MFN tariff.
Right, sir. And just a few questions before we let you go. Now, there's a lot which has been said about, the strategies of both the countries. And this is something that, ET now also broke, that the United States is looking at sweeping tariff cuts versus India, which is reportedly looking at an item-by-item approach. But is that item-by-item approach, is that feasible given that the plethora of tariff lines that there are?
Point is that US should not be concerned with the tariff line. They are looking into their business interests. So they should be more concerned in respect to the product which they can export to India. And probably that should be their instinct. Though, of course, for negotiating instance, they are having that India's tariff are very high. But at the end of the day, if the tariffs are reduced in respect to the product which US is not exporting to India, US has no gain flowing from that. So whenever you are negotiating a free trade agreement, both countries look into what are their potential product of export, what are their actual exports, and accordingly, they exchange the list and get the concession on and give concession to each other.
Right, sir. And just one final question. Given that several sectors are in focus which could possibly face the heat, whether it's electronics, pharma, there is that proposal, for instance, for electronics, that there should be a zero duty possibly, which could be looked at, which will strengthen the domestic ecosystem. But I want to get in a word from you on all of these sectors that are facing some uncertainty. What could an imposition of tariffs really domestically mean for all of these sectors?
I think domestically there may be an issue because if you are getting concession on export, definitely you have to provide some concession on imports. Government is already engaged with the industry to look into to what extent tariff cuts will be there. Industry is quite proactive. They have come forward. They have suggested the tariff cut in respect of the product being dealt by them. So probably there is more elbow room which is available to the government than at any given point of time. And I'm thankful to the industry that they are looking into the tariff cut because at the end of the day, that will also increase the competitiveness of the industry in long term.
Right, sir. Well, on that note, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your thoughts on what the outcome of the bilateral trade agreement negotiations could be. Well, April the 2nd is going to be the big date, and we'll wait and see as to how these negotiations are going to go on and how will they impact countries on both the sides. Of course, this is going to be one big story that will be playing out over the next few weeks. Thank you very much once again, sir, for joining us here on ET Now. Ladies and gentlemen, time for us to slip into a very short break. But do join us as we're coming up with lots more stories on the other side of this short break.